All right, we might kick off. Thanks for coming along. Today we have Luke Emerson from Deakin Uni, who's finishing up a PhD on predator-prey interactions, and he's going to tell us today about kill rates and why they are a vital ecological and Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Kate, for the opportunity to be here. Hi, everyone. Just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we meet on today, the Turrbal and Yagara people of Meanjin, and I pay my respects to others past and present. So today I'm talking about the first chapter of my PhD, which was a global systematic literature review on large terrestrial carnivore kill rates. If you're thinking about doing a systematic review and you haven't done one before, then probably think again. I was warned against doing it before I started, but I did one anyway. But it ended up taking, I think, from start to when this thing got published, it was like 3.5 years in the making. So a lot of work. Thanks to my supervisors and people that helped out with this research as well. So I'm pleased to say that this got published a couple of months ago online in Biological Reviews under a different title to today's talk, but if you're keen, please check that out. So I think it almost goes without saying that understanding carnivore ecology, particularly large carnivores or apex predators and predation, is important for understanding how ecosystems function and work because of their impact on community structure, but also they impact humans in multiple ways as well. So in terms of kill rates, they're measured relative to time and they can come in different formats. So typically they're measured in terms of kills, so prey animals killed per unit of time, so kills per day per carnivore or group of carnivores. But they can also be measured in terms of biomass, so the amount of prey killed per carnivore per day, or can be body mass standardised, so kilograms of prey per kilogram of carnivore per day. So why they're useful is because they provide a numerical measure. And once you've got that numerical measure, it means then you can do comparisons across systems, species, time, etc. When kill rates are integrated with other information like predator and prey abundance or densities, you can then look at predator-prey dynamics and community level impacts. Because you've got that numerical measure, it means you can then look at other potential factors influencing kill rates, so disturbance, climate change, competitors, and how they might impact carnivore foraging. And of course, fundamentally, they provide information on the foraging ecology of carnivores and their metabolic needs. So for the purposes of our review, we considered a large carnivore to be mammalian, terrestrial, on it, a mean adult body mass of 15 kilograms or heavier, and a consumer of vertebrate prey. So that was these guys, unusual suspects, were included. But we did exclude reptiles, marine and aquatic predators, and predators of plants like pandas. And we did include 4 other species that are typically less than 15 kilograms because they are or can be apex predators within their respective ecosystems. So we had 31 species included in our searches. So we screened over 4,500 articles from multiple sources and identified 192 unique species-specific kill rate studies. So the first study was conducted in 1949 on mountain lions in Utah, but it wasn't until the 70s that kill rates studies started to pick up a little bit. So each of these colours just represent different species. And I think some of the reasons for that uptake over time was, I guess, growing interest in ecology, but also carnivore management, ungulate management, and also technological advances like radio collars, GPS collars, and these types of things, making this type of research easier to do. So we identified kill rate estimates for 17 and 31 species, and most kill rate studies were for these 4, and they constituted 73% of all studies, with grey wolves, probably not surprisingly, the most well-studied of all. So the distribution of studies, not surprisingly, was mostly in North America with 55% of studies. But what was of greatest concern, I guess, is the relative lack of studies in places like South America and particularly Asia, and then Australia, which I'll touch on more later. This means that the areas that aren't shaded in that white greyish bar, these are temperate regions. So most of the research has occurred in temperate biomes. And then very little around the equator, and the area that you see near the equator, I think all of that from memory is tropical grasslands rather than forested environments. So just to touch on that a little bit more, this is just a map basically showing the distribution of overlapping distributions of carnivore species. So blue means it's just one species occurs there, and then as you go up through yellow, orange and red, that means there's more species co-occurring in the area. So as we can see, the pink dots show the study kill rate studies. So Asia, you've got a lot of yellow, orange and red there, and we've got 17 large carnivore species, yet only a handful of studies. So just shows that it's really understudied in that part of the world. As far as we could tell, we were limited to English, studies written in English. So I don't know if there may have been things published in other languages that I didn't come across, but I would say that what we found was representative of the trends in what's been published. So this means that 91% of studies were conducted at latitudes greater than 15 degrees, and kill rates in tropical forest biomes are under study. And there's probably a few reasons for that. One being it's difficult to study in those environments. You've got thick rainforests, so trying to find kills is difficult. Trying to deploy GPS collars, and maybe you might not get the fix rate that you want to try and find the kills. But also, I think there's a financial, economic element to it as well. A lot of the countries near the equator maybe have got less money to invest in this as well. But I think it's probably a large logistical constraint, because a lot of research has been done in Africa, for instance, that is by overseas institutions that go and do that work. There's a lot going on here, but basically this is a matrix showing the distribution of kill rate studies relative to species and biomes. So you see lots of zeros on there because that's a lack of work in those areas. And I'll draw your attention to the greeny coloured boxes. So they indicate where there is more than expected research effort, so more than expected kill rate studies for that species, given the proportion that biome makes up of the global distribution of that species. So each number, the number at the top represents the number of kill rate studies that we identified, and the number in brackets below represents the proportion that biome makes up of the global distribution for that species. So if we look at a couple in isolation, grey wolf, for instance, you can see in the middle, 21 studies in temperate broadleaf and mixed forests, and they only make up 14% of the global distribution of grey wolves. Whereas we look at the top of the brown box, that's indicative of less than expected studies. 3 studies in deserts and xeric shrublands, despite it making up 20% of their global distribution. And I think from memory, most of that is in Asia, across Asia, where it hasn't been studied, and grey wolves occur in those areas. And if we slide across to pumas, you can see that 28 studies in temperate conifer forests, but only makes up 7% of their global distribution. Yet if we come down here, these 3 tropical forest biomes make up 64% of their distribution for one study. So you can see that certain biomes, like even for the most well-studied of species, there's a lack of research in certain systems. So I'm just going to run through quickly some of the key findings from our synthesis of kill rates. So we found that on average, solitary species exhibited higher per capita kill rates than group living carnivores. And this is most likely explained by a couple of things. One, group living carnivores can target larger prey, so then they can reduce the frequency with which they have to kill. So they can also better defend their kills from scavengers, and therefore utilise more of their prey. David. So as you can see, high risk, high reward, and we'll compare that to a different hunting strategy in a moment. We also found that multiple subordinate carnivore species kill approximately 2 times as much live biomass than they eat, and this probably relates somewhat to what I spoke about a moment ago, in that these solitary carnivores can't necessarily, or subordinate and solitary carnivores often, in some cases, can't defend their kills. In the case of the cat species, they seem to be able to cope with these losses relatively well, whereas wild dogs, in African wild dogs, have been found to be in lower densities where they co-occur with lions and hyenas. So they seem to be often at the limits of their, I guess, hunting and energetic needs and fulfilling their energetic needs. So we also found that ungulate kill rates remain relatively stable across solitary feathered body sizes. So that's represented by this cyan coloured line, flat line at the bottom there. What that indicates basically with body mass, so log mean adult body mass increasing, and a kill rate on the y-axis. It's just showing there's no positive or negative relationship there, and it just means that they're killing proportional, basically, at a rate that scales with their body mass. So Eurasian lynx, which weighs about 18 kilograms on average, through to a tiger around 150 or 60 kilos. So there's a nearly order of magnitude difference in weight, but the kill rate doesn't change. And this conforms with research by Chris Carbone and others, which that shows or indicates that large terrestrial carnivores are energetically constrained to hunting relatively large prey, and probably represents optimal foraging as well. And I think maybe the most interesting finding from the synthesis was the potential energetic advantage of ambush hunting compared to cursorial hunting as carnivores become larger. So again, we've got adult body mass on the x-axis, we've got a body mass standardized kill rate on the y-axis. Each of those dots that you can see represents the average kill rate for different species of carnivores. So we've got, you can see there's a positive trend line for the cursorial hunters. So they need to kill more relative to their body mass as they get heavier. And that kind of makes sense. The bigger you are, the more you've got to move that. It takes more energy to move that mass around the landscape to hunt, and given their hunting strategy, whereas ambush hunters go in the opposite direction. So they actually reduce the amount they need to hunt relative to their body mass. And there's a really tight linear relationship there as well. So to highlight this and compare to the previous video, I'll just draw your attention to an ambush hunter and how they work, and likewise consider the energy being expended here versus the wolves. You see quite a contrast to the wolves, and I guess the synthesis of kill rates gives insights into or aligns with what you would expect from their behaviour and group living versus, cursorial hunting versus ambush hunting. So as I touched on, there were multiple species that we identified that there were no kill rate studies for, but there were 6 in particular that was of most concern, and it's these 6 species. And mostly because they all consume birds of prey, obligate carnivores, likely to have an impact on their prey populations and play important roles in their ecosystems, but they're all threatened with extinction to some degree as well. So I'm just going to touch on dingoes because we're here in Australia briefly. So there was one study that we found that reported a type of kill rate, but it didn't meet our criteria in terms of the methods that it used. This study was conducted by Shepherd in the 80s and up in northern New South Wales in an arid or semi-arid environment. And it was looking at dingoes coming in to kill kangaroos at a watering hole at a dam. And this study's been referenced by multiple other studies and papers, particularly in regards to the limiting effects of dingoes on macropods, but also it's been used as kill rate in model parameterization. However, if we were to take this kill rate on face value, it would be the second highest body mass standardized kill rate that it's on record, basically. That would mean that it's 42% higher than the average grey wolf kill rate, despite dingoes weighing 60% less than a grey wolf on average. And this would put that kill rate in the top 4 kill rate measure for all other kill rate measures. So it's for this reason that I guess it's probably not a very reliable, robust measure of kill rates. And it just highlights a couple of things. One, that we can't rely on single studies for information, but also for a species such as dingoes that are so controversial and heavily persecuted in this country, and we don't even have a reliable kill rate for them, considering when we compare that against grey wolves in North America, which is the most well-studied large carnivore in the world. So it also appears that most kill rate research has been motivated by conflict between humans and carnivores for ungulate meat. And whilst this is a relatively limited set of motivations, these studies have provided really important insights into predator-prey dynamics and carnivore ecology. And I'm sure we're all aware that, I guess, human activities, climate change, etc., are having an impact on species interactions. And kill rate studies are a useful metric for understanding some of those impacts on predation, on trophic relationships, etc. but it appears that it's not widely recognised. So this could risk poor ecological outcomes for some species when we don't have this type of information. In fact, we only identified one study that's had explicitly assessed the impact of human activity or disturbance on kill rates, and it found that female mountain lions increased their kill rates of deer in response to human disturbance. So there are obvious consequences to prey populations as a result of human disturbance on large carnivores. I'm not going to go into these in detail, but just some other things that came out of the review were that there's a need to look beyond just ungulate predation. Ungulates are typically predation on ungulates are normally studied for the reasons I've mentioned already in regards to the interest in that and the conflict between carnivores and hunters, for instance, but also methods of bias towards detecting relatively large prey. And most large carnivores kill ungulates. However, that's not to say that other species aren't important to large carnivores, specifically at different times of year. So wolves, for instance, in summer, most of our data that we have is for winter on wolves. They'll go and kill beavers, and they disassociate a lot in summer. So they might be going hunting by themselves rather than in groups. So there's other prey that are important to these large carnivores, but we don't really understand the impact of the carnivores on those or the importance of those prey necessarily. We also found that there was a lack of accounting for system complexity in a lot of these studies. So a lot of studies are just a single predator, single prey analysis, and they might be trying to assess the impact of predators on the prey populations, but not accounting for other predators in the system. So when they're looking at wolves, they might not be accounting for the impact of bears and coyotes, etc., pumas, and these other things that are also killing stuff. There's also a need for kill rates to be reported in the model metrics that I outlined at the beginning of the talk, just so that those comparisons can be made across systems, but also they provide different insights as well. And another thing was just fundamental population parameters, which are difficult to obtain, but they aren't reported typically. So abundance of prey and abundance of predators. And that means that these studies, which they invest a lot of time and money to get this data, but if they could just get a little bit more and report that at times, that means we can get deeper insights into predator-prey dynamics. So the take home is that hopefully I've convinced you that the kill rates are a critical metric for understanding various aspects of carnivore ecology, and when they're integrated with other information such as prey densities, then they can provide deeper insights into predator-prey dynamics. We still know very little for many species, as I pointed out, and that risks, I guess, poor conservation management outcomes for many species and their prey populations in the case of rewilding or setting of hunting quotas, for instance. And it also limits our ability to predict the consequences of climate change and human disturbance and activities on predation, on carnivores and ecosystems more broadly. So that brings me to a close. There's a QR code there that you can check out the paper. It's open access. There's my contact details. As I said earlier, I'm submitting my PhD early next year, and I'm looking at other aspects like spatial ecology of carnivores and some of their coexistence and competition with behavioural stuff, temporal activity. So if you're interested in any of this stuff and you want to have a chat, then let me know. Thanks very much for listening.
That's like a huge amount of work by the look of it.
Yeah.
Some extraordinary findings. I was amazed that polar bears don't have any kill rate studies.
Yeah, so the closest, but there's a researcher, Sterling, who's done a lot of polar bear stuff. The closest, I think, was a type of kill rate, so number of kills per 100 bear days, where it was just an observation tower looking at polar bears coming into an area and killing seals, but it didn't meet our methods criteria in that you didn't know how many polar bears it actually was. It was just polar bear days, so it wasn't individuals that were being tracked. So that was the closest. There was, I think, one study that looked at that, but other than that, yeah, nothing. Which is a surprise for a lot of the species, I must say.
Yeah. Just following on from that, how are kill rates mostly estimated? Is it observational or radio tracking?
Yeah, so different. So if you're in Africa, then you can do direct observation because it's an open environment, and so they'll just typically go out at dusk and nighttime and track carnivores. Like, so for lions, for instance, they're pretty lazy during the day. They'll hunt at night, so then they'll look for those. But you can just do it from a vehicle and track them, and they're so conditioned some of those populations are carnivores, so they don't care about a vehicle being near them. Whereas most the other studies, well, pumas, for instance, they're probably the best data in the world. For those guys, was radio collaring, but now it's GPS collaring. So what happens is they'll go catch some pumas, put GPS collars on them, then they'll download the quite frequently, every few days, then look at the clusters. So they'll look at a cluster analysis of GPS fixes. And if it's, for instance, they'll use an algorithm and say, well, if there's X number of fixes within a certain amount of time, and if they're at night time, let's say, then they'll go, that might be a kill site. So we'll go out and investigate that kill site as quickly as possible without disturbing the predator and see if there's a kill there. And then with wolves, it's been, a lot of the stuff's been done through snow tracking and aerial surveys. So they'll follow the snow tracks and then follow them aerially or with VHF collars. Yeah.
Pretty intensive.
Yeah, it costs a lot of money to do this type of stuff. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, I take that.
It followed because that's what I was trying to picture, how you would even collect these data, and I can sort of picture it with big things like lions and that. Or, there's probably terminology for it, but things that don't get their kill stolen and that you can probably tell even if you don't find the kill that they've eaten. Whereas like things like dogs or even leopards, they might kill a bunch of times and you never know because it gets nicked and you know, they get dogs, I mean, they can do it at any time of day. How do people study that?
So unfortunately, I haven't actually had the chance to do this type of assessment myself, like these studies, but as far as I know, for instance, with the puma stuff, they'll see a cluster, they'll go out to the cluster and then try and look for signs of a potential kill. So, and then if they feel confident that the signs there, so let's say there's some fur, there's blood, there's trampled vegetation, it looks like there might have been an attack or something, they'll infer that probably was a kill by that puma because the activity, the GPS fixes indicate that probably was. Other times it'll just be like, yeah, we might have found a kill, but if we can't reliably assign that to the predator, then it won't be assigned to them necessarily. And then that's the other issue, because these methods are biased towards larger prey, then yeah, smaller things you miss. But with the GPS collar stuff, they do detect often smaller prey as well. So how often they're missing smaller prey being killed remains to be seen, but they are picking them up at times. And there was another data set that I included was probably maybe the most accurate, potentially, was leopards being tracked in, I think, Kalahari, like on sand. And so they had professional trackers that would track on the sand, and they'd be following them just a day behind or so. And so they could tell every single movement the predator made, the leopard made, because of its tracks, but also every prey animal that came near because there's the tracks of the prey animal as well.
And take birds and things. I mean, how?
Well, you'd probably still see feathers potentially. So if you were following that, there's certainly a case that you're not going to detect everything for sure.
Very cool work. I find often in these like big data synthesis exercises, you come away with more questions than answers. So if I gave you $1 million to go and like fill a gap that you found, what would you kind of personally do as your third priority?
Well, there's so many, but like one thing that I'm hoping to explore, I guess, in the next couple of years will be trying to get funding to do dingo stuff for sure. Not that it's just about getting kill rates for dingoes, like that's the be all and end all, but it's about, if we go and track dingoes and we've got that GPS data, we've got their kill rate data, we can answer so many more questions if we look at that. And given they're such a highly persecuted species, there's so much money that's spent on killing them basically. And some research by Rachel Mason, who's a PhD student in our lab, in you and Richie's lab. Her work's in the Mallee, and it's showing that she's using camera trap data, but it's showing that dingoes seem to, both in their diet but their movement, they're not really going near farmlands that often. They're kind of avoiding those, and they're not sheep that are around those areas, and that's what they're controlled for. They're baited for, dingoes. They're not appearingly attacking sheep either. So kangaroos, as you'd imagine, are the main thing that they're preying on. That's not to say that but dingoes and other species aren't a threat to livestock, etc. But I think it's blown out of proportion sometimes, the rate in which they kill. There's other research that's shown for other large carnivore species that yes, they will kill livestock at times, but when that's compared against wild prey, their preference is always for wild prey, basically. I assume it's got to do with risks associated with livestock often. But yeah, I think that would be the first thing would be dingoes, but also just getting into some of these tropical environments and trying to do research there. You've got all of South America where there's pumas and jaguars across most of that area, and we don't have information for them. Foosas and clouded leopards. I'd love to go to Borneo, for instance, and do something on those species, which would be amazing. But it's just, yeah, as we touched on, lots of money is required for that.
I don't have $1 million.
I think the challenge might be too, like I've thought about, like I'm hoping if I can frame a research opportunity the right way for dingoes, maybe can get some funding. But the problem is because they're so controversial, is maybe there won't be an appetite to fund it because of, I don't know, maybe people want to live in ignorance. I don't know, but it's surprising. I've got another bit of a review going on, trying to look at what we actually know about the predation impacts of dingoes, looking at the literature, and it's shown up that there's very little information. So for this species that's always spoken about the impact it has on livestock and prey populations, it's all very inferred from things like the dingo fence that, oh, there's a bit more vegetation over there and there's a bit less here and there's more macropods there and there's less there kind of thing. And I'm not doubting that these species are having an impact like these carnivores, but we just don't have really reliable empirical data to back up some of these conclusions that people are coming to. Yeah.
You have this plot showing the number of studies against the habitat.
Yeah.
Is there big variation in habitat, or does give predators need a given amount of food no matter where they are?
Do you mean like for within? Sorry,
Like
if you go.
for example, wolves in habitat A and habitat B.
Yep.
Are they estimated similar, or are there big differences?
Oh, okay. Across different systems. Potentially. I haven't assessed that specifically. So, for instance, grey wolves in North America, their kill rates seem to vary by season. So, like their kill rates increase. So the biomass of their kill rates in winter is higher in North America for grey wolves than in summer, I think from memory. But the kill rate goes up. So the number of prey animals that they kill in summer, grey wolves goes up because they're killing smaller things. But then when that's compared to India, the study of research done over there, there's not the same relationship. It seems more stable across summer and winter. So different system, different environment, different dynamics going on. So whether that's the case for all different species, I don't know. I would suspect that, for instance, pumas, which are much larger in at their extents, like so in Northern America and down in Southern America, they can weigh up to 80 kilos or something like that, a male. Whereas in Central America, and so there's tropical areas like in Belize, I think they're averaging maybe 25, 30 kilos, something like that, a puma. Same with the jaguars there. And it shows like what they prey on varies. So jaguars in Belize, for instance, prey on a lot of armadillos, so something relatively small, whereas other parts of their range, they might be eating capybara and more caiman and larger things. So I think the habitat type and prey availability, I think it does vary, like it does influence kills, but I haven't assessed that specifically yet.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, actually thinking about Brazil, since I'm from there. I think the prey size are usually smaller, like much smaller than what you showed. And also the puma are smaller in general. Jaguars may vary more depending on the region. And we also have the Nile wolf, which I think would enter your.
Yeah, that's clear.
And it eats like basically small things,
Yeah.
and a lot of fruits also. So I think it would change. It would be very interesting if we could, of course, have more data on that.
Yeah.
It would give another perspective, maybe.
So there was a plan, like the original plan for this work was to do a meta-analysis, like so to try and collect all these kill rates and then look at environmental factors that might be influencing the kill rates in different ways. So this, a couple of my supervisors that were involved in this research, they did that for mountain lions. but I ran out of time, but also I became concerned that because there's so much variability, how do you control for some of that, particularly the methods as well. So pumas, that's the best data there is basically because of the way it's been collected. Whereas a lot of the data for grey wolves, like I touched on, is just in winter. And the methods, they're pretty reliable, but it's not as good as what's been done for pumas, let's say. And so my concern was even if I tried to do an analysis of looking at environmental factors influencing kill rates, given that I'd have to chunk up the data, like slice and dice it so much that there just wouldn't be any much strength to it, like to doing that analysis for certain species. Maybe it's possible for wolves in winter, pumas and Eurasian lynx, but it's whether it's worth the time and effort to do that, I'm sure. But it's a possibility for the future, yeah, perhaps. But you're right that the variability in what some of these things can kill and what they kill, and I think that's the reason why there's probably not kill rate for a number of the species like maned wolf and other things. They will just kill little things. People don't really care as much about that. It's harder to study maybe as well. The bears that we included in here, being omnivores, they might kill the occasional vertebrate prey on many of their species, but they're getting a lot of food through plant-based resources and things like that. However, there could be more done on black bears and American black bears and brown bears for sure, and polar bears.
Firstly, it was a very good presentation. The slides are awesome, so very good work there. But I had a question about dingoes, again, since you brought it up. And to think about Gari, which is famous for all its dingoes, for sure. I think it's thought that they scavenge a lot of marine debris, whales and turtles and stuff that wash up on the beach. And I'm curious if you were able to account for like scavenging behavior in kill rates, and in theory, like, you know, if the dingoes are bolstered by marine debris that washes up, would they maybe have a lower kill rate there compared to the desert or something?
Yeah, so I would imagine they would. I tried, so basically I excluded kill rates that were scavenging. You couldn't separate the scavenging from the kill rate. If you could, then I included it. That's not to say that all the kill rates that didn't include scavenging. It was just that if it was explicitly mentioned that that included scavenging, then I didn't include those studies. It was typically for wolves, and there might have been a couple of coyote studies. And I think from memory, I think it might have been coyotes and wolves showing that, yeah, their kill rate was lower where they had access to offal piles from hunting or things like that. Yeah. So I imagine, yeah, it would be a lot of it. Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, great talk. I think you sort of suggested that maybe the beginning and the end that kill rates might be a useful indicator. Do you have examples from any of these studies where people have used it to identify change in the habitats? I'm assuming that as the trophic dynamics change, as more or less habitat, that the kill rates change. Is that
Or in relation to your habitat,
yeah, just as an indicator of what, or I would assume it would be something about the habitat or the population itself.
Well, I guess that goes back to the previous question about like, yeah, habitat influencing kill rates. Can't remember what the results were for pumas and kill rates for that review, but I imagine it will, like based on this, like, so depending on the prey available, which is obviously going to be dictated by habitat, then I would imagine that's certainly going to change. And then in terms of using kill rates as a useful metric, for instance, two of my supervisors, I think they did a piece of research which looked at management action of, what was it? It was in South America. It was something to do with, like, there was, I think, sheep and some other native, that's right, camel, a native prey species in South America, and I think they removed the sheep from that area, and I might be getting this wrong, but basically they hadn't accounted for the role that this alternate prey source was taking up, and there was pumas and a fox in the system, and basically their argument was, had they done some kill rate predation related research first, they would have been able to predict that there was likely to be a change in hunting behaviour of the remaining predators, and it was going to put more pressure on the threatened ungulate that was in the system. So just highlighting that we just need some more information about predatory behaviour before we engage with certain management actions around whether it be mesocarnivores, large carnivores, prey, other potential prey, return prey in the system as well. Yeah. Hopefully that's your question.
Yeah, I was thinking about it because on the marine side, I think the kilograms per kill, if you saw that going up, I would think that that system was doing better, right? We have a lot of examples of large marine predators who are going back to eating things that they didn't eat before because they aren't in the system anymore in the same manner. So if you actually track that over time, you'd probably be able to tell that one of many different ways of seeing that the system was sort of recovering.
It's interesting. Yeah. Trying to think if I came across anything that indicated that. I guess the closest thing is like I've touched on before, but it's just the seasonal effects at least, like showing that when certain prey are available, like so wolves, classic example, like their kilograms, I guess, per kill increases, especially when there's deep snow. So this has been shown in front of the carnivore species like Eurasian lynx as well. When there's deeper snow, that makes it more difficult for the prey to move through that area, and they can become slightly easier pickings for the predators, so then they can kill more. And then there's cases in the literature of potential surplus killing. I don't know how, I also excluded surplus killing. So where, for instance, I think there was one study where it found like deer got bogged in some, I don't know what it was exactly, they got bogged in something, and then wolves came in and just killed a whole bunch of deer in one day. Really unusual type of thing. They didn't eat them all, they just killed them. So an unusual event, which would have just inflated the kill rates too much. So I excluded those types of things, those studies. But yeah, there's certainly seasonal conditions influence the amount that is killed per kill, and it goes down typically in summer. But yeah, it's interesting what you're saying, like to look at how that might reflect habitat quality and what prey available. Yep.
Thanks so much for the talk, that was great. I was just with the dingo thing again. I've just been out in central Queensland with a few farmers out there, and about a fifth of them, I'd say, are using dingoes as like a management tool for their kangaroo population. So it would be so interesting to look into that, because some people are actively maintaining dingo populations to try to maintain a better condition for the dingo. So the kangaroos. So I think there's a real interest that's like pretty slow. It's only a fifth sort of thing for people. People are definitely starting to look into that. So
I imagine up there that's cattle that are being
exactly.
Not
So
sheep. Yeah.
it's right on the edge. Like a lot of places sort of went out of sheep because the dingoes got too bad, and are now with cattle. And there's still huge debate. Some people, even with cattle, will not tolerate a single dog. Others will have plenty. So it's but I think there's definitely a lot of interest in that space. That'd be so cool to unpack, just to see how, because otherwise, you got to they're paying kangaroo shooters to come and clean all the kangaroos sort of thing.
It's definitely interesting. There's work when I touched on that work by Shepherd that had the only kill rate study. I can't remember the author that used that in their model parameterization to suggest that dingoes are beneficial to graziers, basically saying that they'll reduce the amount of forage that the macropods, the kangaroos are taking by managing them, and that's better for graziers. But I think that was mostly with cattle, because they do kill sheep more readily. But obviously I'm on the side of tough luck. Come up with other ways to manage that and protect these species, the dingo, in the landscape. But that would be interesting to talk to them and just get the different perspectives, obviously, from them versus the people down South Australia. South Australia's a terrible place for dingoes. There's just so much mating going on. It's just ridiculous. I think that's a bit behind in the ecological front there.
Any other questions? I'll just quickly ask about that ambush behaviour by leopards. That seems to me to be true ambush behaviour, which of course is common in reptiles and fish and amphibians, but I never really thought about it as a possibility in a big end of it. So would that only occur in really prey-rich environments? Is it the only sort of environment where they could actually sustain themselves with a true?
Maybe with that particular method of jumping out of trees, like I think David said on the video, that that's maybe less common, but But the ambush strategy, obviously, like the physiology of cats is such that they can't, other than a cheetah, which is a little bit more cursorial hunter, but it's only short distance, like a few hundred meters. They just can't chase prey at long distances because of their physiology, like a canid can. So they're restricted to that type of hunting. This is where it's so important to protect cover for these types of predators. They need the cover to hunt their prey, so they need forested or shrub cover at least near open areas where the prey are likely to be, so they can kill them. So I think yes. So habitat type is going to be really important to sustain them because they can't necessarily hunt in any other way. The closest thing I've seen with those guys ambush hunt, I mean, lions are pretty open environments at times that they've got to try and hunt in, but they probably get around in other ways. But pumas down in, I don't know if anyone's seen some amazing footage. I think it's called the Golden Triangle or something. It's where pumas in South America kill guanacos, and it's very open. It's like basically no trees in this environment. There's a few little undulating slopes and the occasional shrub, but it's very much pumas have got to try and hunt in the pure open and try and kill things. So cats are pretty cool, and they are able to find a way, regardless. But yeah, if there's certain habitat types, it makes it easier for sure.
Is there enough information to think on anthropogenic factors with kill rate? I'm thinking what you mentioned about the tracking lines by car, and some suggested the lines can use roads in parks to chase giraffes onto roads with higher success rate in chase. I think wild dogs can use roads as well for the line sight. Ties into the ambush thing. I think there's some work in the US that suggests that underpasses might be good ambush spots for mountain lions.
So in regards to roads, definitely. So like there's literature, well, studies have shown for lots of actually it would be the same for cats. So canids like foxes, dingoes, wolves, they'll use linear features like roads that are open, and they can then get around the landscape much quicker. How that influences kill rates hasn't been widely being looked at. So Melanie Dickey, she has a paper called Farther Faster, I think it's called. Basically, she didn't do the kill rates, but was looking at wolves' ability to use linear features in the landscape to move around faster and access prey more readily. So presumably, I think her gut feeling is they probably do have higher kill rates because they can just kill things more quickly. Probably don't even need to use the entire kill, and they can then move on to something else. And then with camera trapping studies, for instance, I was in Belize helping out with work there, and this is the same, I think, throughout the world. Is most camera traps are put on roads, like trails. So they're not necessarily busy roads because lots of carnivores avoid those, but if they're quieter roads, like they make moving through the landscape way easier. How that influences kill rates, don't know, but I dare say that it wouldn't hurt the predators from making more kills, that's for sure. But yeah, it'd be interesting to look at that. Yeah, in more detail, for sure.
All right, well, we might wrap it up.
So,
Look up the book. Thank you very much for coming.